Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of ShatterCast, where we talk about all things entertainment industry and our faith at the same time. Joined, of course, by the lovely Hannah and Derek, my wife, and Derek, the leader, emperor, really, of tyrannical dictator.
It just
Shattered
keeps getting worse.
Empire.
Oh, please stop.
And I can't wait to talk about today's topic, but I have a question before we get to that intro video. Hey, Derek, do you know how a cowboy starts their day?
I don't know, John. How does a cowboy start their day?
Well, when they get out of bed, they got to reboot first, get the cowboy boots back on. And today we're going to talk about reboots.
And Space Cowboys.
Yeah.
And if you're still here after the intro, thank you very much for putting up with the worst jokes that I have ever uttered, truly. I just want to make a public apology. Anyway, so we're going to talk today about reboots. And specifically, there's been some news recently that Disney is looking to reboot Firefly. And there's been some discord within the community of Firefly, those who have really missed having a nice Western space cowboy. I think a lot of us have been getting our fix from Mandalorian because it's kind of got a similar vibe, and it's been pretty awesome. But now Disney is like, well, we've got one successful space cowboy. Let's take the other one and make it happen. I got a lot of thoughts about this, but I want to open it to you guys first. Let's try and start with positive. How about that? Does anything about this feel good to either of you?
Sure. Just real fast to kick off. If you guys don't know what Firefly is,
Fair enough.
stop watching this podcast. You don't belong here. No, I'm just joking. No, Firefly.
Watch the entire thing and then come back tomorrow.
Yeah, it's only one season.
Yeah. Firefly was a sci-fi show that kind of had a space western feel of a small group of people flying around on a spaceship. It only lasted, stay on the set for one season. I think it was like 13 episodes. It got canceled, but it was such a cult, classic hit that they actually made a movie out of it called Serenity, which kind of did the whole season in like one movie. So there was kind of some finality to it. But the universe has expanded with games, some comic books, books and things like that. And as John was saying, yeah, Disney, there's some talks about them rebooting the whole series. So positive, negatives. Positive, it's such an interesting universe. Or verse as they call it. So I think it'd be great to see some more live action stuff take place. I have some thoughts about maybe a better way they can do it. But like I said, it is very beloved by the fans. What are some thoughts you guys have?
Well, I just want to really quickly toss out there. It had 14 episodes. Derek's not true.
Hold on. Here's my geek cred. Here you go. Take it back.
Go ahead.
You're no longer the emperor.
Just got dethroned.
He's been dethroned. Yep.
I was just going to say that a lot of people love the show for the talent. I almost said content, but I mean, the content's good too, but I was trying to say talent. You've got Joss Whedon at the helm with directing and writing, and Nathan Fillion, Matt Bomer,
Adam Baldwin.
Adam Baldwin, Jewel Staite, Alan Tudyk, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because people love the actors so much, that has been a concern. But I think a positive that we can look forward to is that Disney is really good at casting. And so if they were to cast these characters with new actors, I think there would be some people upset with that, but I think we can have confidence in whoever they would cast because of what we've seen in the past.
That's fair. The Disney is blurry. Disney
is
is
great.
Disney is pretty good at casting. I think that's a fair point. To both of what you said, sticking with the positive first, yeah, it's a wide open canvas for fantastic stories. Because we've only had one season of Firefly and one movie afterwards, as far as things that have hit the screen, we do know there's a large expanded universe with a lot of people writing things, just like with Star Wars. When it comes to the actual screen, we've only seen a very small piece of this whole story and a very short time frame of that as well, where the plot takes place from the show and the movie. And so there's a lot of directions they could go. And so, yeah, I'm excited about getting more stories in the Firefly universe. Aside from the fact that it's Firefly, I don't know that I'm really excited about anything else. Hearing that it is a reboot, I think my thing is I think of some other shows that I love. Like we mentioned earlier, Hannah, you brought up Stargate Atlantis. Stargate Atlantis and Stargate SG-1. They were, for those of you who don't know, phenomenal sci-fi shows. Stargate SG-1 started in the mid-90s and went until the early 2000s. It lasted 10 years. And Atlantis started, I want to say, in 2004, and it went for 5 seasons. And Atlantis was a spin-off of Stargate SG-1. It was not a reboot of Stargate SG-1. Another great show from a little bit older than Stargate would be Cheers. A lot of us want to go where everyone knows your name, okay? And then another fantastic show, Frasier, okay? Both of these shows lasted a really long time. And you know what? Frasier was a spin-off of Cheers. And I'm noticing a pattern here.
I'm noticing a pattern.
A lot of great shows that have other great shows attached to them is because it's a spin-off. And it's like, whoa, what are the odds? You don't have to tell the same story with different people. You can do a different story in the universe. And I feel like Hollywood forgot that spin-offs exist. And every time they want to revisit an old IP, they're like, let's reboot it. I'm just like, you can still call it Firefly. You just get rid of the Serenity. Don't touch Malcolm Reynolds. He's perfect. He doesn't need you to touch him. Disney, leave him alone. Right? Like,
well, even if you still include the ship and have
or just do it like 20 years later.
Right.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, you're talking about how Hollywood sometimes forgets that spinoffs are a thing.
Yeah.
Then we just had this huge drop of Disney announcing a bunch of shows, and a lot of them are spinoffs.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Forget everything I said. Disney already knows better. So why are they doing this to Firefly? They have no excuse.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, when we first heard the news, and I first heard this on social media, I made a comment. I was like, why do we have to reboot everything? Can we just realize that you can continue a story? To the negative for rebooting a show like Firefly, a lot of the cast, as Hannah was saying, and stories is so loved by fans.
Yeah.
If you try to replace those characters, you run the risk of alienating those fans and it not being as good as the original.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think it makes a lot more sense to do a spin-off, to do something, as John was saying, set in a couple years in the future, where you can even bring back some cast members to, be regulars or mentors or things like that, while telling a whole new story. And again, I think sometimes Hollywood forgets this. There's been a list of many reboots over the years. MacGyver, they just redid Walker, Texas Ranger, Hawaii Five-0, Knight Rider, Roswell, Battlestar Galactica, and
Knight Rider.
Several times actually.
I didn't hear the Walker, Texas Ranger either.
Yep. Walker, Texas Ranger is just coming out. Knight Rider, they did just a straight out reboot, I believe, and then they did Team Knight Rider. I think that might be a continuation, but that's a whole nother. We're getting in the weeds here, people.
They still have what's his name as the voice of the car, Feeney from Boy Meets World.
Oh, I didn't realize that he was
the voice of Kip, the car back in the original show. Yeah, it was Feeney.
Now you know. You learn something new every day. So
That was the best part of the show.
so sometimes reboots work, especially if a show is super old, like Hawaii Five-O. Some people really enjoy that. That lasts for several seasons. I think that might be on its last season. Battlestar Galactica, a lot of people enjoyed that. But like MacGyver, sorry, not hashtag not my MacGyver. You know, things like that.
Didn't that MacGyver like get started with like the dumb commercials, like the MacGruber commercials? Isn't that like what kind of kicked off the idea of rebooting MacGyver?
I have no idea.
I think it was like the MacGruber like Super Bowl ad, and it was the dumbest thing where he was like diffusing a bomb, but then he kept getting distracted talking about his awesome hair or something, and like they all died, and it was like the stupidest thing.
I thought that was just an SNL skit. I don't know if that's the reason.
Maybe it was just a skit. I've stricken it from my memory.
So one thing that I think is probably a big reason for Disney considering a reboot instead of a continuation of the story is Firefly only got one season.
Yeah.
And so rebooting seems a lot easier, I think, probably because there's not as much content to go on. And so with it only being one season, it's easier to scrap something like that and start over because it's not like several seasons worth of series that they would have to redo. Yeah. And then they would continue the story, I imagine, if it was successful, past the first season because Fox isn't involved.
Yeah.
And the
Did you see that light shade of Fox?
And so if they want to continue the story, they probably thought it would be better to reboot because the only thing they would be redoing is the first season.
Yeah. I will toss this out here as
no immediately.
Something that could be positive here. The word reboot is what's being tossed around right now. But for all we know, it could be a reboot, and really all they mean is they're just going to pretend like the show didn't happen as far as whatever's canon in the universe. We know when Disney takes over an IP, they like to decide what is and is not canon anymore, and then also change that constantly, right? So like originally, none of the Star Wars games were canon, and then slowly some of the Star Wars games were canon, and then eventually the animated shows were canon again, even though they were legends for a while. So Disney is they think complex thoughts sometimes, and so part of me is wondering is the word reboot being tossed around, but the show we end up getting isn't actually going to be Malcolm Reynolds and Wash and Zoe and Jane Cobb. Like, is it going to be a reboot in that it's a show that takes place in the Firefly universe and they just never reference the original show? If they do that, I feel like it could be okay because they're not just recasting all the characters we already know.
And I know that in the MCU, which Disney also owns, they've involved Joss Whedon. And so they've had good success with Joss Whedon. And so I think a key thing would be to involve Joss Whedon in whatever they're doing with this universe.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Derek.
Joss Whedon has been having some current issues with Hollywood right now, so I'm not sure if they'll do that or not. That's near here nor there. I think to what John was talking about, I think if they redo the show without the original characters or even referencing them, I think that's a net loss. I think, again, because many fans like the original show, and a quick disclaimer, there was some content and stuff that not everyone might like, so we're not saying you should or should not. But for those fans who did like the show, I think they would definitely be more open to a continuation of the story, even with new characters. Again, with some of those old characters, appearing as regulars or dropping in from time to time. Just creatively, as I look at it, I think that would be a better path for this particular show. I think it depends on each IP and each show where you should do a full reboot or where you should do a spin-off or whatever it is. I think they could have a lot of great success, and a lot of fans would like if they continue the story set in the same universe without pretending what happened before didn't. I think that would be a bad thing, specifically for this IP because it has so many fans.
Agreed. I think part of the what am I trying to say here? Um, we talk about having the original cast as much as possible if they could have cameos or if they could come back in the show for little bit spots here and there, and along those lines, I mean, aside from the actor who played Shepard Book, may he rest in peace, uh, they're pretty much all very active in Hollywood still and very big names. I mean, Jewel State went on to be in Atlantis. Marina Baccarin, who was Inara, she went on to be Adria in SG-1. So they actually, two of those characters had major roles in Stargate, to the actors rather. Adam Baldwin is still doing stuff. Nathan Fillion, is Castle still running? Because it's been going for like 10 years.
No, he's in a show
Rookie,
about,
I think.
Yeah, The Rookie. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, he's still very active in Hollywood. So
He was in a law show
with voice acting. I mean, no spoilers, I guess, if you haven't seen the ending of Firefly. But Alan Tudyk was K2SO in Rogue One. So I mean, all of the people from the original series are still very much active and very successful in Hollywood. So it's not like half the cast is retired and would have no interest in a cameo. So there's that.
Definitely. And I think our whole kind of, this is a good jumping board to just think about reboots in general. Are reboots a good thing? And I think we might all agree that it definitely depends on the IP. It depends on how long it has been since the last show came out. It depends on how well it was received by original fans. I think our argument would just be it shouldn't be the first tool that studios use, because there are plenty of other ways that they can tap into some of the same IP and some of the same fanhood without necessarily saying they have to restart from scratch a show that has some good recognition. So
I think oftentimes people, you need to clarify what is meant by reboot, and because I think a lot of people have it synonymous with remake. There have been some really awesome remakes of like movies and that kind of thing that I prefer over the originals. Reboot could mean remake, but it could also just mean rebooting the universe. And so I think on the scale, a lot of people prefer sequels, and then they're a little more okay with a reboot, and then it's harder to sell a remake. But like you said, it is definitely a case-by-case basis. So there have been good content from all three of those categories.
Yeah, I mean, we're really treading into an interesting territory here with this kind of last question of how we know how it feels in the moment when someone says we're going to reboot Firefly. Okay, we know the initial reaction we feel to that. We know that would be different depending on what show we're talking about. So there is no one size fits all answer to are reboots good or are reboots bad. With that in mind, I think there's a conversation to be had around how do we know if a reboot, from a fan perspective, is going to be received well or received poorly. And I don't know that that's actually easy to define. And I don't know if, someone says, hey, they're going to reboot Firefly, and then we have this visceral reaction of negativity. But how is a studio going to always know, okay, we can reboot this, we can't reboot that? People will have a good reaction to this, they'll only have a negative reaction to that. And in reality, I think probably the average person is going to end up watching whatever Disney does with Firefly, and a majority of them are probably going to like it. And I'm saying that with relative confidence because Disney has kind of been killing it for the last 15 years in the movie and TV scene. Yeah, I feel like it's not an open and shut. Okay, reboots are always good or they're always bad. It's kind of every single show or intellectual property is different, and it's like a scale of varying goodness and not goodness. Does that make any sense? Kind of.
I think so. And
if you're watching at home and that made sense to you, leave a comment down below and thank me for my ultimate.
Help John not feel alone. How's that navigate into our faith point, though, as we were talking earlier?
You know, it's one of those things where if you don't know how it's going to be received, then you know, you could end up with your foot in your mouth, right? Disney could end up rebooting Firefly and it could be bad. They could reboot Firefly and it could be great. But I think all of us, first of all, give them a chance. You know, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. And we're going to live a lot happier lives if we go into it hoping that we're entertained. But as far as the actual discussion of are reboots good or bad, when I think a good question for us to ask is, when should we let something go? When should we decide this was fantastic and I loved it and it was wonderful and it's over and it's okay that it's over? You know, how do we come to a point where instead of just looking back with longing and feeling the loss of something that no longer exists, to when we can look back and just be glad that it happened and move on and not be so locked into the past and just spending all of our time wishing that we could relive it. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time in the past. They spend a lot of time trying to relive the glory days, whether that's being a professional athlete or something really successful in college, or, I mean, it's not unrealistic to say that for some people, they're constantly reliving the fact that they were prom king or queen in high school. That was their biggest life achievement, and that's what they talk about all the time. And I think that there are times when, you know, we have to be able to say, hey, this happened and it was awesome and I love it, and it's not going to happen again, and that's okay. It happened and it's over. And good things, you know, good things can finish. Good things can finish, and then other good things can start. I'm reminded of a sermon that I preached a few years ago that Hannah actually brought up earlier, which I had completely forgotten about. So I'm glad that somebody out there remembers the things that I say sometimes. We were talking about Samson in the jawbone, and when he slew 1,000 Philistines in Judges 15. It says that he looked around and on the ground was the jawbone of a donkey. He picked it up and he used it and he killed 1,000 Philistines. I'm just going to say real quick, anyone who could pick up like a bone of an animal and kill 1,000 people with it, don't want to mess with that guy. Also, if you're like the last 20 people and he's killed 980 Philistines, don't you think if you're in the last group of 10 or 20 that you're just going to walk away like, you know what? I don't need this. You know, I'm good. You know, it's like, you know, he's killed over 900 people. I don't think we're going to be the lucky ones that get him. Just saying. Anyway, but the for me, one of the most integral parts of that story is once he kills the Philistines, he tosses the jawbone aside and moves on. He doesn't hold on to it. He doesn't patent it. He doesn't try to sell it to other tribes in Israel. He recognizes that in that moment, God had used something for a particular purpose, and that purpose was now over, and he should let it go. The power of Samson to be able to kill the Philistines, the power of him to be able to defend himself and to act righteously was not in the jawbone. It was in him because God was in him. And so sometimes I think we give too much power to things in our life, and we think that, you know, this awesome thing that happened, we need to cling to it and try to replicate it over and over and over again. And yes, it was a great thing, but when we let it go and we move on, there's other great things that can happen. There's new things that can happen, and I think that those should be, you know, just as much celebrated. New things and new moves of God, and God can do something in your life 10 years ago and do something different in your life today. He doesn't do the same thing every single time. So that's That's my thought. I could talk for another 20 minutes, but I will drive everyone crazy. So someone save me.
Yeah, I like what you said about just being able to let things go well. I think as we apply it to real life, there's a lot of experiences we've had. Some might have been great, some might have been negative, and I think we all struggle a little bit with being able to either celebrate or learn from those things, but be able to let it go well and move on with hope for the future. And I think a lot of times we feel frustrated in life, even in our spiritual life, even frustrated sometimes with God because we feel like He's not doing what we want Him to do, or He's not doing the thing He did before, and all this stuff. And a lot of our frustration comes because we have a misunderstanding of how God wants to move. And there's this interesting balance that we have in Joshua 4. God commanded Joshua and the people to take stones and to build kind of these altars of remembrance. And they were commanded to use that as a point of reference so they could remember what God had done, the miracles God had done for them. And they were commanded to tell their kids that, so that the kids, the next generation, will hear about all the great things that God has done. So there's that aspect. But then in Isaiah 43, God says, forget the former things, don't dwell on the past, see, I'm doing something new. And I don't think those two things contradict. I think God wants us to get to the point in life and experiences with both good and challenging things, where we can look at it and we can remember all the great things that God has done and how He's gotten us through things. But also remember that God is a creative God. He's a hopeful God. He's a God who likes to do new things in our life. And He doesn't want us to get trapped into just feeling something has to happen a certain way in order for us to be excited about it. Again, God is always active. He's always doing things. God's character never changes. How He approaches different situations might be. And so hopefully that's an encouragement for you if you're feeling stuck or frustrated or you're stuck in the past. Again, there's things we can learn from the past, but God always wants us to move forward with hope.
Very well.
Yeah, I like how you said how those two things can coincide. And I think it reminds me of how we were just saying that a lot of times with these reboots or remakes or whatever, bringing back IPs, it's very much a case-by-case basis. And God is the one that knows what's going to be best in each individual situation. I oftentimes say that it's a comfort to know that we are not the ones that are in control. The idea of being in control is easy to cling to and want, but in reality, having to be the one to figure everything out in every situation is not ideal. And being able to place that in God's hands and trust Him with it is what's really going to be what's best for you.
It's a great point. It's a great point. I think, as we're talking about reboots, but ultimately, a lot of this conversation boils down to I think there's two different sides of the coin. On one side of the coin, we are learning ourselves when to let go of good things and bad things. Good memories that affect us and bad memories that affect us, and being able to kind of seal that off in the past and look ahead to what God's doing today and what He's doing tomorrow. I think those are healthy disciplines for any person of faith to be able to walk in. And on the other side of the coin, I think I say this because I think a lot of fans of a lot of things, they get very passionate and they get very aggressive, sometimes unnecessarily. I like, we might lose a subscriber here, so I apologize in advance. Rick, I like all the Star Wars movies, all of them, every single one of them. I like the original trilogy. I like the sequel trilogy. I like the prequels. I like Rogue One. I like Solo. You know why? Because I like Star Wars. Because I want to enjoy Star Wars. Are they perfect? No. I could sit here and talk for hours about everything that's wrong with every single movie, because every single movie has plot holes and failures. Some have more than others. But at the end of the day, when I go to the theater, I'm going to the theater to enjoy Star Wars. I'm going to the theater because I'm excited to get new content in this universe that I love. And so the attitude going into it is not one of I'm looking for ways to poke holes at this and look how they messed up X, Y, and Z. I recognize that there are those problems, and most of the arguments that I hear about what people don't like about the movies, I don't disagree with. It's just they don't ruin the experience for me, because I want to be entertained. I want to have a good time. And so when we talk about a reboot of Firefly, I have a lot of apprehensions. I'm concerned that I will be unhappy with changes that they make to the universe if they make too many changes. If they stick with the original cast of characters but just recast everybody like the third Fantastic Four thing, I could be upset with that. But ultimately, if the story is good, I'm going to look past all of that, because I haven't had new Firefly content in over 10 years. And I'm just going to be happy that I can enjoy something in the Firefly universe. Now, there are people who are going to disagree with that, probably pretty strongly, because in their mind, it's an IP that needs to be protected because it's so powerful and profound that only excellent things should be made out of that. And they're going to deem that a reboot of Firefly doesn't meet up to that standard. And so they're going to feel like the IP's worth and goodness is brought down by a poor reboot. I get that. I understand people are going to feel that way. But I think that all of us, if that is how we live our life, if we go into situations wanting to see the good, wanting to focus on the good, we're going to end up dying a lot happier than we are right now. And so that's my little soapbox. Just try to enjoy things that you don't think you're going to enjoy. You'd be surprised. I'm still not going to skydive, but that's not something I'm going to enjoy ever. Anyway.
On that note,
any other final thoughts, you guys? You can feel free to totally disagree with me.
I disagree. I think skydiving sounds fun, but
that's
I
good.
probably won't end up having the opportunity. Anyways, no, I think you make an excellent point there, John, with the idea that we oftentimes are too critical, and I think with the intent being good, but oftentimes the intent isn't the only, like, you can't just lean on your good intentions. Your actions are important as well, and the way that you move forward needs to be done with wisdom, and there are consequences for the things that you decide to say and do, regardless of what your intent with those actions are. And so that sounds like a super serious statement, because there are many serious situations where that is true. But like in the case where you were saying that, like, your intent is to protect this IP that you love.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go into it with a lot of negativity, then it's just going to end up being ruining the experience for you.
Yeah. That seems like such a somber statement, even though it wasn't. I don't know. It's just the energy level is like. No, I started it. I understand. I understand. The entire channel is going to tank now, and it's my fault. So
yeah, it's a good thing we aim to misbehave.
Well, thank you guys for being here, for chatting about the reboot of Firefly and just revisiting things of the past in general. It's always a good time talking with you guys. Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, all those wonderful things. If you disagree with me, I invite you to post that in the comment, because I like to have conversations with people who disagree with me, because it makes me a better person. So whether you agree or not, leave a comment down below. Tell us what your thoughts are. for the reboot of Firefly. If you are listening to this in a podcast and there's no way for you to comment, then when you get a moment, go to our YouTube channel, go to this video, and then leave a comment. Thank you. We love you faces. You are awesome. Remember, we do love you, but more importantly, as I always say, God loves you. And we'll see you next time. Take care, guys. I love how, like, 6 months from now, there can end up being a supercut of all of those weird moments before we actually start going.
For us, like, attempting the club, like, the dance scene before we actually did it, I guess rehearsing that.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.